The controversy around Dave Chappelle's Netflix stand-up special is still going on. It's still in the public discourse. So today, what I wanted to do is kind of build on what I was talking about on my stream where I covered this topic last Thursday and make the broader point about, I guess, streaming companies of both video and audio often promoting that they support LGBT rights, but then at the same time letting some of their most prominent creators just say whatever they want, including bigotry to the LGBT community, but more specifically to the transgender community. And I want to make and show the overall point that being bigoted towards transgender people is just far more accepted and tolerated by nearly everyone, including the corporate world and the political world. So I want to kind of illustrate this by talking about Steven Crowder, Joe Rogan, and of course Dave Chappelle. Before we get any further, I want to plug my social media and Patreon for about a minute. There are timestamps in the description, so skip if you're not interested. For every 5k, we get a new chocolate orange. We're finally making a bit more progress towards 45k, where I'll be getting a new chocolate orange. And I want to get 2 more before the end of the year, so help me hit 50k by the end of 2021. I also live stream on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and that stuff is archived on the Kavernacle Extra, my second channel. So when there's like a big controversy, sometimes I kind of tune out and don't really follow it properly, despite, knowing the main point of the controversy. So some of you, even though it's been really big news, a lot of you guys aren't actually American. I'm not American, so we don't really care so much about people like Dave Chappelle or other stand-up comedians from the States. So just give you a rundown of what's been happening. All the fallout from Dave Chappelle's controversial new special by Danielle Cohen. So last week, Dave Chappelle greeted a cheering crowd at the Hollywood Bowl, chuckling, "If this is what being cancelled is about, I love it." He was referring to the reaction to his newest comedy special, The Closer, which recently dropped on Netflix and has been skewered for its transphobic and homophobic humour. The Closer is littered with jokes targeting trans people. Chappelle stuffed an impressive array of transphobic and otherwise offensive opinions into the special, which opens up with a joke about black people beating up Asian Americans, followed shortly after by the warning that it's going to get way worse. He brought back his bathroom bill bits from 2016. He defended rapper DaBaby, who spent most of August apologising and then unapologising for his anti-LGBTQ rant. He then teed up a bit about gay people have made more progress in the black community, riffing that if slaves had oil and booty shorts on, we might have been free 100 years sooner. He continued to put black and LGBTQ experiences against each other throughout the show, seeming to overlook the fact that many queer people of colour also experience racial discrimination. Finally, Chappelle proceeded to defend J.K. Rowling, saying that he identifies as Team TERF, referring to the acronym for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, a term used to describe Rowling's camp of self-proclaimed feminists who argue that trans women aren't real women. In that spirit, Chappelle then dove into a lengthy segment proclaiming his belief that gender is a fact. At one point, he compared trans women's genitalia to plant-based meat and the existence of trans people to be blackface. He expressed anger at the fact that Caitlyn Jenner had been awarded Woman of the Year by ESPN, saying women should be mad that someone who's never had a period could win such an honour. So, of course, even from the stuff I've just read to you, obviously not shown you any of this, is that this is clearly, pretty bigoted. It seems to be pretty standard for him as well. I'm going to get into this in a sec with a trans black woman commenting on this stuff. But, of course, it's disappointing to see someone who's, of course, from a marginalised group in American history and American present, basically helping the same sorts of people who do love keeping African Americans oppressed and uses this bigotry to dehumanize and promote really unhelpful stereotypes about transgender people and just generally create a hostile environment for people like this. And with a lot of people from marginalized communities, you think they'd know better, that the same types of things have been done to them historically. Maybe they shouldn't prop up the same system and do to other people what has been done to them. But the Netflix CEO stood behind the special, so Ted Sarandos, the CEO of Netflix, defended Netflix's decision to keep the special up on the platform in a staff memo apparently sent in response to requests from team leaders onto how to manage upset employees. Chappelle is one of the most popular stand-up comedians today, and we have a long-standing deal with him, the memo reads. Sarando said The Closer does not violate Netflix policies against titles that are designed to incite hate or violence. explaining that some people find the art of stand-up to be mean-spirited, but our members enjoy it, and it's an important part of our content offering. He continued, externally, particularly in stand-up comedy, artistic freedom is a very different standard of speech than we allow internally. So just have a massive deal with someone who says this stuff and just, you know, share it around the globe to millions and millions and millions of people, but you probably couldn't say that stuff internally. That makes total sense. And I hate the defense that stand-up is like this artistic thing where you're pushing the boundaries and the only way you can be funny in stand-up is if you're bigoted. That seems to be the message. Like, these comedians who cry about cancel culture, first of all, seem to not be very funny. I don't find any of these stand-up comedians particularly funny. I don't really understand the American obsession with a lot of these people as well. But at the same time, you know, if you need this stuff to stay relevant, stay funny, maybe assess your material and assess if you were ever actually funny or if your content was just like shocking and edgy and has a shelf life, because that stuff doesn't age well. So a trans employee resource group is planning a walkout on October 20th in protest of how the company has handled the response to the special. In a company Slack channel that includes 800 staffers, one employee wrote, "Our leadership has shown us that they do not uphold the values for which we are held." The post continues, "We have been told explicitly that we somehow cannot understand the nuance of certain content." Now, I couldn't actually access what Netflix traditionally put out in Pride Month about the content they value, but they have put out loads of like weird PR statements about LGBT people before and promoting LGBT shows. Of course, in Pride Month, like many companies, it puts the rainbow flag in them because they absolutely love the LGBT community, not just want to use them. But now I thought it'd be interesting to give you the response of someone who is black and trans. So Dahlia Bell, a black transgender woman comedian who co-founded Portland's Queer Comedy Festival, spoke about this and actually wrote a piece for The Guardian and spoke to William at Week as well. So for The Guardian, she wrote, "Dear Dave, we're both comedians. I guess that makes me a member of your tribe. I'm sure you've never heard of me though, and I can think of at least 3 reasons for that. I'm black, I'm a woman, I'm transgender." Bell's letter to the comedian is personal in tone and arguably more of an opinion piece and a work of stage criticism, but it also contains an important argument about what Chappelle is actually trying to do with the closer, have the final word. "It's over," Dave Chappelle says at the end of his special. LGTQLMNOPQYZ. "It's over. I'm not telling another joke about you until we are both sure that we are laughing together. I'm telling you this is done. I'm done talking about it. We realise this is essentially misogyny noir, hatred and bias towards black women that targets both their gender and race, and erasure of black trans women," Bell tells WW in a phone interview. "They turned to me and said, no one is better equipped to handle this than you. Something I've always admired about comedy was its abilities to push boundaries and challenge norms. Now it's 2021, and I think we can all agree that bitter old men griping about progress are killing comedy." Bell says Chappelle's fixation on treating transgender people as a target of jokes is a portrayal of black trans women and Chappelle's own legacy as a boundary-breaking comedian. "He's built this sad new career out of whining that the queer community is too sensitive. Just because we're pointing out the fallacies of his argument, I'm not even angry, he's just wrong. He's building a new legacy out of mocking the existence of trans people while also erasing the experience of black trans women. To him, being black and being pro-black isn't something he can comprehend out of his own perspective as a cisgender, heterosexual black man." So that's obviously a very interesting perspective and kind of like plays into what I've said as well, talking about the boundary breaking. And of course, Dave Chappelle being this very famous black comedian. But of course, black transgender people are one of the most marginalized groups in the entire United States. So again, it feels so strange that you have this massive platform, but the people you're going after are the most like marginalized people in some instances in the entire country, or at least one of them. And what I also find funny, these guys like to say like, well, it's such a minority thing, why do we all have to care and why do we all have to talk about it, while at the same time making it a part of their comedy routine that will be watched by millions and millions. And then it's not surprising that most of the people defending Dave Chappelle are people who are normally massive bigots and, of course, racists towards African Americans. Loads of American conservatives are using this as a platform for their culture war against trans people in general. And when people like that are siding with you, you may want to really reassess your comedy. Now, moving on, another so-called comedian, Joe Rogan, who isn't funny in the slightest. He's just pretty much a comedian because he's famous and wants to do comedy. But he has also been in a lot of hot water for this stuff as well, being transphobic. Now, very ironically, the Democrats brought this up when Bernie Sanders went on his podcast, while at the same time behind the scenes really trying to get Biden and Pete Buttigieg also on the podcast, showing you how much these guys like to use this stuff as well. But Spotify, of course, has also defended their decision, with their employees being very unhappy with Joe Rogan's, consistent transphobic and platforming transphobia on his own massive podcast, which Spotify paid him so much money to make exclusive to their platform. So Men's Health, I don't know if Men's Health is like progressive, I never really knew that, but they had a good article about this. So by Philip Ellis, Joe Rogan is spreading transphobic hate speech and it's putting lives in danger. So it's talking about an episode in 2020. It said, take the recent episode with guest Abigail Schreier. During Schreier's conversation with Rogan, in which she promoted her book, Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, Schreier invalidated the lived experience of trans and non-binary kids and teens and made numerous dangerous, entirely unsound, false equivalencies. She compared transitioning among teenagers to historic adolescence phenomena, such as eating disorders, self-harm, and the occult, calling this age group the same population that gets involved in cutting demonic possession, witchcraft, anorexia, and bulimia. She even described wanting to transition as a contagion, with the potential to infect other children with the same ideas, drawing yet more scientifically baseless parallels of eating disorders. Anorexics, they are always really careful when they put them together. They have to be in hospital wards because we know that it will cause it to spread. Plenty of savvy producers book guests like this to stir up controversy and accumulate outraged clicks from their viewers. But was Rogan sitting back as a host and letting Schreier dig her own grave? Nope. He appeared to reaffirm this notion that being trans is something a child can be persuaded into through peer pressure, referring to time spent with wacky friends at school. He also mocked Caitlyn Jenner and described LGBTQ+ activists as people who aren't looking at all sides of it. They have this agenda, he said, and this agenda is very ideologically driven, that anyone who thinks that they might be trans should be trans, are trans, and the more trans people, the better. The more kids that transition, the better. So I like this last little part. Rogan likes to put on a furrowed brow, an even pensive voice, the hallmarks of a reasonable man with an inquisitive mind, someone who is just asking questions or wants to start a debate. In reality, he's an intellectual shock jock who amplifies the voices of conspiracy theorists, racists, homophobes, and transphobes in the name of an interesting conversation. And it's becoming increasingly clear that as long as these tactics keep making him money and acquiring him followers, he doesn't care who he hurts along the way. So Caitlyn Jenner is extremely problematic for trans people anyway, because when she was running for governor, all the awful stuff she was saying about trans people and like healthcare and sport and everything, but she responded to this. So Caitlyn Jenner slams Joe Rogan for transphobic rant that bashed the Kardashians, saying it's not a joke, it's very serious stuff. I just feel like Joe Rogan has a lot to learn. He's homophobic, transphobic. He does this all the time. I've been gender dysphoric my entire life. Once I got to the point in my life where my kids were raised and they're all doing well, I said maybe I could live the remainder of my life authentically, and it has been the most wonderful experience I've ever had. Now, of course, just like with Netflix, Spotify had a massive backlash to this as well. So back in 2020, Spotify is reportedly fighting with employees about hosting episodes of Joe Rogan's podcast that some consider transphobic. Vice reported that CEO Daniel Ek addressed staff concerns at an all-hands meeting on Wednesday. In the case of Joe Rogan, a total of 10 meetings have been held with various groups and individuals to hear their respective concerns. One question asked, why has Spotify chosen to ignore the Spectrum's ERG's guidance about transphobic content in the Joe Rogan catalogue, referring to an internal employee representation group? Many LGBTQAI+ ally Spotifyers feel unwelcome and alienated because of the leadership's response to the Joe Rogan podcast. What is your message to these employees? X said, Joe Rogan and the episode in question have been reviewed extensively. The fact that we aren't changing our position doesn't mean we aren't listening. It just means we made a different judgment call. Ek also said, if we can't have open, confidential debates, we will have to move those discussions through closed doors because of all the leaks. Now, why do these companies not care about this backlash? Surely if Joe Rogan was platforming, I don't know, Charles Murray, and they were talking about the bell curve, the backlash would be more swift. Maybe there'd be a lot more pressure on Spotify itself, but because it's transphobia, they don't really care. Joe Rogan makes them a lot of money, like how Dave Chappelle makes Netflix money, or, subscriptions and everything like that. So to them, not enough people in their audience actually care about transphobia for them to really take a hit, because in their mind, like I always say with so-called woke capitalism, they have this whole thing in front of them. They're saying, should we sanction Joe Rogan? Or maybe get rid of him for what he's doing? Or should we keep him and ignore the people who are angry at him? Of course, in a business sense, and that's why capitalism is so awful, spreading this hate is far, far more profitable. And you see that with basically all forms of social media. But that doesn't mean Spotify won't use LGBT stuff to promote themselves, because they will. So on their own blog, you have plenty of stuff. So LGBTQIA plus Spotify employees share how they claim their space. Spotify kicked off June by announcing this year's Pride campaign, Claim Your Space. The experience, complete with playlists, podcasts, and permanent in-person murals, served to celebrate the commitment and resilience of LGBTQIA plus creators. It also recognised the ways audio and art have always been avenues for their expression. We encourage the queer community of creators and listeners to continue to make noise, make their presence known, and make their own rules. They also profile Spotify employees who are LGBT as well. So you have Jordan, him. I claim my space by creating things I care about, using my voice, and paying it forward to those who come after me. Ashit, I never shy away from making my opinion heard, however stupid it may be. Brit, I claim my space by being the example I needed when I started my career. I provide visibility to the B in LGBTQIA+, for those who may be closeted because of a lack of representation. So then another one, Spotify celebrates LGBTQIA+ creators and fans with our 2020 Pride campaign. Let's face it, Pride looks a little different this year, with cities around the world unable to host these celebrations, but although queer folks and allies can't take to the streets with flags and floats, we can celebrate the feelings of pride and togetherness from LGBTQIA+ artists and creators. So that is the problem with woke capitalism in a nutshell. When one of your most profitable assets platforms people who spew bigotry and seemingly agrees with them, well, you won't do anything about that. But on the other hand, you'll pretend as a marketing thing that you actually really care about your LGBT creators and how they feel and how the platform is like a safe space for their views. Again, this whole rainbow flag for the companies is always ridiculous. People who say like woke capitalism is good rather than a cynical attempt to pander to certain groups when they feel it's profitable. And let's remember that. That is something right-wingers, anti-SJWs always get wrong. They think these companies will do this stuff at a loss themselves because they're pushing some sort of left-wing agenda. They don't do this stuff. When they eventually change, it's because they have marketing data, they have marketing campaigns which have evidence that may work by appealing to, I guess, more progressive politics, not that these companies ever actually care about this stuff. Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, Netflix, they never ever care. And a lot of these companies give a pass to so much, discrimination, but transphobia seems to always get a pass. Now, another company that lets this go is YouTube as well. Now, Steven Crowder has actually finally seemingly been sanctioned for being transphobic. Now, we're going to get into how Steven Crowder's transphobia has been tolerated for years and years, but after him getting a bit of a suspension on YouTube for transphobia, Daily Wire reporting, of course the right-wingers are loving this stuff, YouTube's counsel sent an email to Crowder's attorney, William Richmond, informing him of a strike against Crowder's account, explaining that a September 30th video uploaded to Crowder's channel targets the transgender community in an offensive manner. We write again on YouTube's behalf regarding your client. YouTube has repeatedly instructed Crowder regarding its hate speech policy and warned him against continuing to violate that policy. YouTube specifically warned Mr. Crowder that videos he uploaded showed a pattern of recklessly targeting the LGBTQ+ community for abuse and insults. It warned that further uploading of content that targets or insults these people would result in additional penalties. Now, Crowder is quite a unique case in that I feel like he's trying to get banned. I feel like he's trying to become this right-wing free speech martyr because he literally just says the most awful bigoted stuff in every single video about every single group. It's not just transgender people. So I'm surprised YouTube finally took a stance on this stuff, because remember this, the Daily Dot, recalling this thing that happened 5 years ago. Steven Crowder blasted after photos of him pretending to be a trans woman at a gym resurfaced. Old images of conservative YouTuber Steven Crowder posing as a transgender woman are stirring debate after resurfacing online this week. In a tweet on Monday, Jack Saint shared images from a video in which Crowder seemingly attempted to get himself kicked out of a gym while presenting himself as transgender. Steven Crowder enters a gym disguised as a trans woman to expose how trans people don't fit in with normal people, accidentally demonstrates that almost nobody gives a and has to literally start throwing weights around like a child to instigate mild conflict. In one part of the video, Crowder can be seen purposely setting off the gym's lunk alarm, an audible siren that sounds when gym goers drop their weights too loudly. At the end of the video, Crowder is not only kicked out of the gym but banned from Planet Fitness. After attempting to enter another location, a gym employee informs Crowder that they are aware of him and his attentions. That is just one taste of Crowder consistently spreading bigotry or trying to make comedy about transphobia, as him and a lot of other conservative comedians like to do. But also Ben Shapiro likes to do this. So here is Ben Shapiro's reaction when Elliot Page came out as transgender. Again, this stuff is very, very bigoted, very nasty. I don't think Ben Shapiro is ever going to be sanctioned for this stuff, but here you go.
If I did not discuss one of the great issues of our time, and that is that the actress Ellen Page, who is, was, and shall remain a woman, is now a man. So let me read you the headline from CNN, which conveys zero information. Right? We have now been forced as a society to simply say nonsense, to simply just say things that are nonsense, that don't make any sort of logical sense, that don't actually translate from English to reason. Okay, so here is the headline, and you tell me if you know what the hell this means. Okay, ready? Elliot Page, Juno star, shares transgender identity. Do you have any idea what that means? Like, seriously, do you have any idea what that means? When I first saw the headline Elliot Page, I thought, whoa, Ellen has a brother? No, it turns out that Ellen Page is now identifying as Elliot Page. And the media, instead of saying, here's a headline with content, Ellen Page announces she identifies as man, wishes to be called Elliot Page. Right? Now I would have the whole story. But Elliot Page, Juno star, conveys nothing because Ellen Page was the star of Juno. So I'm like, wait, was her brother in that movie? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about right now. Because the media have created this bizarre standard whereby if a person declares themselves a member of the opposite gender, the entire world, especially in the media, must immediately flip on a dime, stop calling them by the name everybody knew them as, and stop calling them by their biological sex. You end up with complete nonsense. Just complete bleh.
Now, people like Crowder and Shapiro, these conservative commentators, and people like Joe Rogan for Spotify or Dave Chappelle for Netflix, they bring in too much revenue, too many eyeballs. For people like YouTube, it's not worth sanctioning them. Crowder is becoming this weird case in that he's just taking it so far. If I was Steven Crowder, I would have been banned years ago. If I did what he did with my size of channel, I would have been banned ages ago, because for YouTube, that's not worth the hassle. Someone like me doing that, someone like Crowder doing it, they don't care. But YouTube has this stuff as well. Happy Pride 2021. As part of our ongoing commitment to supporting the LGBTQ+ community, we're hosting a month-long series of celebrations that also raise funds for the Trevor Project. We believe that everyone should be able to find communities of support, break down barriers, transcend borders, and come around shared interests and passions. The LGBTQ+ community is one of the cornerstone communities to have found acceptance, representation, and a home on YouTube, and has been a vital part of making YouTube what it is today. So of course, like many corporations, YouTube has its Pride Month where it talks about how important the LGBT community are to them and how they were vital to their success. So if this community is so vital to you guys, then why don't you make it safer for them? And at the very least, why do you accept this bigotry, which often violates your terms of service, but you just never want to intervene because you don't want to, I don't know, outrage the conservative mob, you don't want to lose subscribers, you don't want to lose ad revenue maybe from people Joe Rogan and all these people bring in. But it's just a sad fact at the moment that transphobia gets a pass from basically everyone. And that's corporations like I'm showing right now. That is just people on Twitter in general and everything like that. You can say whatever you want about trans people pretty much, and you will never face sanctions, and you will pretty much never face repercussions. But I hope what this video has shown you that these companies who say they care about this stuff, who say the LGBT community, who say transgender people are so important to them, are usually lying. Because at the same time, while they're changing their logo to a rainbow flag and they're talking about all this stuff, they are letting Joe Rogan face no repercussions, Dave Chappelle signing big deals with him despite a long history of his stuff. Steven Crowder continues to have a platform despite just spouting this stuff in every single video. These companies do not care. And like I said, just like with them even supporting LGBT stuff in the first place, they only do that when they think it will benefit them. That's why like the Saudi Arabian versions of these companies doesn't change their flag for Pride, because in their minds, it's not worth standing up for that because you will lose money. So for them, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're trying to use the LGBT community on their platform to promote themselves, to, I guess, pinkwash themselves, while at the same time allowing some of the biggest creators on the platform to just spew this bigotry all the time. I get that comedy can like push the boundaries sometimes and like can really dance on the edge of stuff, but nothing Dave Chappelle has said in these clips is like pushing the boundaries. It's just like straight up bigotry. And if that's funny to you, then it probably says a lot about you. And if you're upset there's a backlash about this stuff, you probably just need to look at your own morals, because these guys aren't even being cancelled. It's just people like me telling them it's not okay and not funny, but the platforms they're on don't care. They still have that platform. Dave Chappelle is not being cancelled if he still has this massive Netflix deal and has a big Netflix show on literally the biggest streaming platform on the planet. So please spare me about cancel culture when Joe Rogan, Dave Chappelle and Steven Crowder can say whatever they want on the biggest social media platforms and essentially for the most part not really face any repercussions. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you want to follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter and on Instagram, come join our communities on my Discord and my subreddit in the description. And if you want to support my work, check out my Patreon. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.